Good evening, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back to Thursday night, Maths 754 Enterprise Risk Management, just in case you're in the wrong place. You should know by now. Okay. I hope you managed to get a little bit of Easter relaxation and Easter break in between times of doing your assignments. And hopefully that's all done now. Now, my email, my phone has been running hot. Vinura's email and his phone has been running hot. You probably know what I'm going to say. There's been a few problems with DSO and lodging on DSO. So I just want to mention a few words about that. Don't panic is the first one. If you've been unable to lodge your assignment, your group assignment on DSO, because the system hasn't been working properly, you won't be disadvantaged for that. We do expect you though to have put in the hard copy. If you're on campus student, then you should have worked out the place for putting your hard copy is in the main faculty. And they get stamped with a date and a time and everything. But I think the major problem I just want to mention for distance students, some of them struggle a little bit getting hard copy in, and tend to rely on electronic copy on DSO. But for those guys, don't stress. It should be working now. I've been told by several people it's all working. If you're still having problems, let me know. I'll let Vinura know, and we'll try and sort it out. But hopefully, it's all fixed now. Has anybody here got any continued problems lodging with DSO? Anybody? Everybody's managed to put their assignment in? Yeah? Yes? Okay, I'll take that as a yes. That's good. Thank God. All right. Now, this week, what I want to do this week is sort of bring enterprise risk up now to a sort of a more practical level. We've spoken over the last few weeks about process, some of the drivers, and all of these things. And what I want to do this week is just talk about how, in practice, it can work or not work. The first part of the lecture, I want to talk about a case study. It's really just an experience. It's my own one company that I've worked with, Enterprise Risk Management. So I want to share that story with you, and feel free to sort of ask questions and as we go along. The second part of the lecture, I want to talk to you about some of the approaches that are out there, some of the general or recognised enterprise risk frameworks that people are using as a basis within their organisations. So there's four really I'll cover, and also talk about measuring the maturity of enterprise risk within an organisation. Now, this is a tricky, it can be quite tricky, and I've set assignment 2 sort of partly around that, and so what I also like to do this lecture is introduce you to assignment 2. We can have a little discussion, get to ask some questions, and there's 2 options with assignment 2. So we'll have a bit of a chat about that and see which one works best for you. Okay. All right, I've changed a few names and details as to this sort of case study story, but I guess the main parts are the same, or the learnings are the same. So, I mean, for those of you who've not worked in a large corporate, this is probably, hopefully, explain a little bit about some of the functions and the structures that go on. If I work, can you hear me still on this mic? Is this one still working? It's not. I just want to make sure if I walk around, is that still? Is it still recording? I'm not sure. Doesn't seem to be. Seems to be working. Okay, I'll assume it's working. So, okay. All right. Now this is a large multinational. They've got very sort of briefly a large turnover of 6 billion. That's Australian dollars. So lots of money flowing through this organisation. They've got about 150 locations. These are manufacturing locations typically in about 25 countries around the world. About 3,000 employees. That's a rough number. So it's a good sized organisation. Now the way the organisation is structured, it's one of these organisations that has got different business units focusing on specific products. And this is quite a common business structure for large corporates. And the interesting thing with this one is that their different business products tended to be focused in different regional areas. Now one of the reasons for that was it had grown by acquisition primarily. So in the USA there was a big drinks bottles company, and they'd acquired that, so US tended to focus on drinks bottles. In Europe there was a paper company that they bought out, and so paper operations were generally focused around Europe. And a similar story for Australia and Asia. And that's the sort of the story. Now, what also happened was, over time, the organisation had other acquisitions. So if there was drinks bottles over in Europe that were being acquired into the organisation, they would generally report to the US management team. So you can imagine that the reporting structure for a European bottle making facility would be via the US management team, and then from the US management team into the head office from there. So head office generally would only deal with the management teams of each of these 4 business units. And I guess another thing that's interesting when you look at structures of these large organisations is that, particularly through acquisition, you can get different cultures within those organisations. They can bring different approaches. For example, the drinks bottles operation would make a lot of high volume products, which were things like bottles for Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and all those sorts of things, where it was very cost competitive, and they were being squeezed continually by Coca-Cola or Pepsi. They were highly vulnerable to the price of plastic, the price of oil, and so one of their big risks, if you like, was the fluctuations in the oil price. Because they were in often fixed price deals, long fixed price deals to supply so many bottles. If their raw materials costs varied, that could impact on the profitability, obviously. So one of their issues was how to manage that, and they would develop what they called cost pass-through clauses in the contracts, so that the price of oil was reflected in the price of the finished product to the customer. So the risk of oil price fluctuations was actually then transferred through to the customer, which kind of protected the manufacturer of the drinks bottles, which was good. But if the oil price went down, the drinks bottles manufacturer wouldn't necessarily benefit from the increased margin opportunities that would present. So, so in terms of culture, the drinks bottles guys would be very focused on costs. All their factories would be located right next to bottling plants, so there were sort of very similar types of operations making the same product within different locations. So their management style was more of a, I want to call it a McDonald's type franchise structure. So each factory would have a factory manager, who would have some very tight regulations to how to operate these bottle manufacturing facilities, and some very tight reporting structures, and it was everybody was the same. So you could take a plant manager out of one factory and put him into another factory, and he would be up and running straight away. Now compare that perhaps with Australia, where they're making plastic film. You would have one factory that's making plastic film, say for bread bags, another one making plastic film for shrink wrap material to wrap up large bulk packages, and it meant that the processes or the machinery was different, the layout of the factories was different, the relationship with customers was different, so it would be very difficult to take a factory manager out of one factory and put him into another one and get him working very quickly. So that created sort of a different type of culture. People were much more free. The factory managers had a lot more autonomy about how they ran their factories and their style of management to produce the products. So the culture of the whole organisation was varied, but it was generally an approach such that head office said, okay, US guys, we're only interested in you producing against your budgets and your forecasts. So, how you produce that, how you go ahead and produce that profit. We're not going to get too involved, but just give us good information, give us the profit. The role of corporate head office really was primarily a way to bring all the finances up to a single point, so that the organisation could report in their annual report a consolidated consolidated view of the finances. And it was a complicated job. If you can imagine trying to report the financial results of organisations which are based all around the world. They've all got different financial reporting systems which they need to comply with locally, so they've got local taxation issues. And then within Australia, you've got sort of Australian taxation issues to deal with. You've got transfer pricing issues where you're moving products from one country to another that head office would help resolve. You've got legal issues, which are potentially international legal issues. So if there's a legal incident in one country, what's the impact of that within the Australian head office? And the consolidation of the accounts using with different currency fluctuations. So treasury function was complicated as well. So these guys at head office were very skilled in dealing with these multinational issues, and sometimes often created conflicts between what was required in one country but what was allowed in another. So there's all these sorts of complications, and if you ever get into sort of large multinationals, it's quite a fascinating area. Lots of specialities. Just talking about the corporate head office, really, I just want to sort of introduce you to. This isn't sort of the exact sort of layout of what goes on in the different departments, but just really a bit of a simplified overview. Obviously at the top we've got the CEO. He's reporting to the board of directors. In this case there was only one executive member of the board of directors, and that was the CEO. Internal audit actually reported straight into the board of directors. So internal audit was viewed as the sort of eyes and the ears, if you like, for the board of directors. And they had the very close relationship there. On a day-to-day basis, they actually worked. There was a sort of dotted line to the CFO, but where internal audit looked and how they reported was really pretty much up to them. And it was viewed to be, an important part of internal audit. The internal audit was expected to produce, independent reports, and there is a potential conflict of interest. If internal audit's reporting up to the CFO, then there's potential for their reports to be tinged with the interests of the executive rather than the interests of the board. Then below the CEO, on the right hand side we've got the executive general managers of each of the businesses. So these are the guys, if you like, the managing directors. They're not directors, the managing executives of each of those business groups that we talked about before. So these guys sat on the executive team and were involved in executive decisions. Now some of them were more powerful than others, and where you had a large business unit, that executive obviously carried a lot of weight because he would be contributing significantly to the bottom line of the business, and also overseeing a large chunk of the balance sheet. So, but anyway, they were all represented there. On the left-hand side, we've really got the different departments in corporate head office, and these are probably the departments. If you ever work in a corporate head office, these are sort of typical departments that you come up against. Now, sometimes they're like this, sometimes they're slightly different. But anyway, the CFO often is like a kingpin of the corporate head office. He's probably the most sort of influential executive within that area, primarily because the major role of any corporate head office is consolidation of accounts and finance-based activities. Below CFO, we had Treasury Department. Below Treasury, insurance and risk, primarily insurance, and reporting and tax reported up through the CFO too. M&A, corporate affairs, that was sort of broken, primarily one or two executives. I put them there together. M&A, they were sort of a special projects executive, and he was a sort of guy you'd never see. He'd be off, scouting out opportunities for mergers, acquisitions, or more acquisitions, divestments as well. So where it was identified there was parts of the businesses they wanted to sell, his role also would be out there finding good buyers and trying to do deals. So again, an important role, very strategic role. Company secretary, that's associated with a lot of the legal reporting. Talked about ASX, principles of good corporate governance. So that role really was a very corporate role, talking to the investment, talking to the ASX, making sure that disclosure requirements were being met. Let's just go back actually to corporate affairs. The role of corporate affairs was interfacing with investment community, so talking to all the shareholder relationships and other investors, making sure that the annual general meeting went smoothly, and those types of activities. The company secretary, talk about legal, was based below company secretary. He reported through to the company secretary, and primarily with that was mostly outsourced. Actually, there's a few large corporates that have a legal department. It really varies, but often it can be outsourced to some of these large legal companies. HR, the old role of HR was a supporting role for the rest of the businesses. So some organisations call it people and culture. So it's about making sure that there's the same approach for managing people across the organisation, assisting the business units follow the same sort of culture, the look and feel of information, put that sort of corporatise the information through the organisation. And at an executive level, they generally would help with the development of the executive team, so training programs for executives, senior managers, sourcing senior staff, and the like. Most of the business units would also have their own HR functions as well for sourcing their local employees. Below the HR executive, the health and safety used to report through there as well. Health and safety, setting the standards of health and safety, pushing that message down through the business groups. And environment, health, safety and environment. So those guys also put the sustainability report together. Any questions on corporate structures in general? Any thoughts as to how that works? Sort of makes questions at the back. Someone's having a stretch at the back and is getting excited. Okay, all right. Okay. Now, the story was that they didn't have an enterprise risk management process. They needed one, or they thought they needed one. What were the main drivers of that? Well, they were dual listed, which meant that their stocks were listed on the US stock exchange and also the Australian stock exchange. Now, companies that were listed in those days under the US stock exchange would have to comply with US stock listing rules and regulations and finance reporting regulations. And this was in sort of early 2000s, and they brought in the Sarbanes-Oxley Act in the US, which meant that all these organizations in the US had this very strict governance requirements, which meant long checklists to be completed and complied with throughout the organization down to a very detailed level. It was if you talk to people about Sarbanes-Oxley, most people in Australia will kind of roll their eyes and go, oh my God, yeah, I got involved in Sarbanes-Oxley, and it was a nightmare. It was a nightmare because it was so detailed. There was an expectation for everybody, pretty much every manager in the organisation, to detail their business processes, and no one really knew where to stop. With any business process, you can define it, and then you can refine it and make it more and more granular, finer and finer sort of detail. And in general, most of these organisations had to bring consultants in to help them with this process. So consultants saw this as a fantastic opportunity to make a lot of money. And so if the organisation asked the consultants, well, how fine do we have to make this? How granular do we have to make this Sarbanes-Oxley process? Well, the consultant's going to go, oh, well, we have to take it, right down to the lowest possible level. So a lot of organisations spent millions and millions of dollars on Sarbanes-Oxley, going through all their business processes, detailing them, and working out what are the risks associated with those business processes and what are the controls that are in place with those business processes, and then going through and interviewing the managers responsible for those processes to confirm that they were being done. Now, from my experience, there was a great flaw in the way Sarbanes-Oxley was actually rolled out. It was put in there to give senior management and the investors more confidence that you're not going to have another Enron, or there's not going to be sort of business processes or internal failures, or the reporting of the finances are wrong, and that was the goal of it. But what tended to happen was that there would be sort of questionnaires going around the organisation to managers saying, do you have, for example, a business continuity plan in place? And the managers would look at this and they would say, well, yeah, it's not kind of perfect, but yeah, we've got the bare bones of it, so I'll put a tick, yes. Now, if the manager said, well, yeah, we've got one, but it's really not very good, so I'm going to put no. So if the manager put no, it would then be flagged at a fairly high level, and then his boss and his boss's boss would then be saying, well, where's your business continuity plan? He says, well, we've got one, but it's not kind of working that well. So the boss's boss would say, well, we've got one, right, put a yes in the box, tick the box that says yes. So because it was so black and white, have you got this, haven't you got that, people tended to be I think, not encouraged, but tended to put, yes, we have it, rather than trying to rate how good it is. And that, in some ways, gave a false message to the top, gave a message to the top, say, yes, we've got all these systems in place, and they're all there and all working. But at a lower level, when I've spoken to managers who've been having to comply with these Sarbanes-Oxley sort of questionnaires and reviews, they've tended to perhaps overstate their abilities of their process controls, which is obviously not a great thing, because everybody just wanted to get a tick and a yes and move on. So because Sarbanes-Oxley was being pushed down as a sort of a prescriptive approach, I don't think it really generated the value that was expected from it. And it comes back in some ways to this discussion we've had before about whether you should have a process which is you have to do by law, or whether you have to do it as an optional. ASX is kind of an optional. If not, why not? Please explain. And Sarbanes-Oxley was much more of a legal requirement. If you don't do the Sarbanes-Oxley and don't do your reports according to it, well, you can't run your business. So I think that was part of the problem with it. Anyway, I sort of digress a bit. Other drivers was the ASX principles of good corporate governance, which we've talked about, increasing expectations on sustainability and reporting, and increased interest from board members. Board members were sort of asking questions, geez, all these businesses are folding, is ours going to be doing the same? Are there sort of horrible surprises out there that I don't know about, that's not coming through the reporting system, which are going to come along and bite me in the backside? So that was the sort of the background, why the organisation wanted to put enterprise risk in. So what did they do? They went and spoke to their consultants and decided, give us some guidance on this, because it was a new concept around then, and a lot of people in corporate, are very busy doing their day-to-day jobs. They don't have time to go and work out how to develop an enterprise risk program for the organisation. It's a lot easier just to go and get a consultant who's an expert in it, help set up the process, educate people internally, and then take ownership internally. It happens a lot. It's not a bad way to go. Because it was kind of like kicked off with the Sarbanes was being driven by internal audit. Sarbanes-Oxley was using a process called COSO, and there's two parts of COSO. There's the old COSO and there's COSO ERM. I'll talk to you a bit more about that in a minute, or a bit later today. So they wanted to use COSO ERM, which is the American process, a little bit sort of linked to Sarbanes-Oxley, and also wanted to use the Australian Risk Management Standard. So a framework was developed by them. Now, one of the things that happened, there was about a sort of a 50-page document put together, which was a framework document based on all this COSO stuff. Now, COSO ERM, if you're going to have a look at it, I don't know, it's hundreds of pages long, but you have to. It's cost about $500 if you want to get a copy, and it's not really something that I'd expect you to go and look at, and it would probably bore you senseless. It bores me senseless anyway. But that was the approach they took, and the consultants put together something that was very complicated. And the result of it was that they went out and ran some workshops, and risk management workshops. You'll be familiar with risk management sort of process workshops. And they were run with each business group at the head office and the leadership team of each. Some of the meetings were about 5 people. Some of the larger business groups had about 20 or more. Using Brainstorm, and probably had about 20 risks they ended up with, and they had mixed results. they didn't use, well, the technique they used, everyone just sat in the room and said, well, what are our risks? You know, what are the risks? So everyone just started talking. They sort of wrote stuff on the whiteboard and came up with their risks. They had a risk assessment process which was very complicated in that they were looking at inherent risk as well as residual risk. The idea was, I think we touched on it before, so that if you identify the inherent risk and then you identify the associated residual risk, you can work out the effect of the control that's reducing that risk. And if we understand how far apart those two things are, then we can work out how important the controls are. And this was run by internal audit. Internal audit controls. So they were very happy that we can identify lots of controls, and then that helps us decide which controls to audit in our audits later on. But anyway, the effect was that people were really confused. What's an inherent? What's the residual? What's the control? And so it was hard work. The results were mixed. There were some good things that came out of it, though. One of the good things, some of the good feedback that we got was that this was a forum that we had never sat together before. We'd never got sort of the mix of people in the room talking about risks to the business before. So it was breaking down some barriers of communication between often parts of the business that never met. In the business units, we might have had a legal representative, and we'd have a production representative, another one looking at research and development. And very rare that research and development would be having these sorts of conversations with the legal department or the HR department, and so it was quite a healthy discussion and improved communication and relationships across the business groups, and similarly at executive too. But on the downside, I suppose, was that the risks that were coming out of it were fairly sort of generic risks. There were things that people really already knew about, and there was it didn't challenge anybody. It's like some risks that we were sort of reporting on, pandemics or major factory burns down, or these sorts of fairly generic risks. There was very little linkage between the strategic plans of the organisation and the risks associated with them. So, we got this sort of mixed feedback. Particularly, one of the biggest was that the reports were lacking focus. So they were just sort of generic risks, and it was sort of more curiosity. Oh yeah, that's interesting. Oh yeah, that's interesting. Oh yeah, I suppose we should think about that one day. Maybe we should think about that. There was a lack of research and analysis. So a lot of people sitting in the room, I don't know, you may have experienced this yourselves. If you've done sort of the risk workshop, everyone just goes, oh, that's a big risk, and that's a big risk. And a lot of it ends up on the risk register, which has been untested. It's just somebody who's perhaps been more forceful in the workshop than others, saying, oh, yeah, this is a big risk, and I think we should rate it as very high or catastrophic or whatever. So there's very little sort of testing of the logic or basis of the assessment. There was no ownership. These guys didn't realise how important it was to have risk ownership, or ownership of the risks, ownership of the controls, so that we can follow up on that. One interesting thing was that the board were presented this sort of swathes of information. There was these huge spreadsheets detailing these risks. We had about 4 or 5 different workshops. Each workshop producing about 20 risks, so that's 100 risks. Every risk got about, say about 3 or 4 controls. In 300 controls, we've got recommendations coming out of that, running into the sort of hundreds. And there was no real way to sort of really boil this down to the important stuff that the board should be told about. So we just gave it, that the board just got everything. So they had this sort of massive spreadsheets of risks, and they're all pretty colours and fantastic, you know. But he's like, yeah. So what should I be looking at? You know, these guys are busy. They need to be guided as to what's important. How does this relate to, you know, this big merger and acquisition that we're about to do? Or how does this relate to the achievement of our financial sort of goals this year, or our budgets? You know, where's the connection? It's just, you know, this is a document which, you know, creates a bit of curiosity and a bit of discussion around the dinner table at board night. So they were happy that they had a risk process, but expecting more, I guess, not impressed. It was also noted that internal audit were driving this process, and you know, it was recognised that the role of internal audit is to report to the board or senior management to say where things are not being done well. Now, the risk management process is a process which the business should be doing. If internal audit has designed and developed it, they're not in a good position to be able to critique it as well. So that conflict of interest was recognised and needed to be changed. So, the opportunities for feedback were. I didn't put my watch on today. Just want to keep an eye on the time. So, opportunities for improvement. Well, there were quite a few, and I think this shows that any organisation who starts out on the trail of enterprise risk management, it's always a constant improvement. You learn as you go. You're always going to be noticing opportunities for improvement. And I mean, I don't know if any of you have been involved in other types of processes like business intelligence, things like that. And when I was working a little bit on business intelligence, you would be mining information from companies and bringing it up to senior management, and people would look at the report you produced and go, oh yeah, this is really interesting stuff, I really like it. Would you be able to produce me a report which shows me a bit of this as well, or a bit of that, and a bit of the other? So then you go away and you produce another report, giving them that type of information. They look at that one and go, oh yeah, this is great, you know, I like this, and hey, wouldn't it be good if we could report on this, that, and the other? Can you find a report? You know, can we? So by presenting people, often they don't know what they want initially. So you give them something, they look at it and go, oh yeah, that's useful, but that's not so useful. Give me more on what I like. And so it's a sort of an iterative process that keeps on going. So you're never going to hit them with the perfect product straight off. It's always going to be iterative. So this is an example of an iterative process. Every time risk management is done or enterprise risk is run within the organisation, it's going to change. It's going to, you know, evolve. Priorities in the organisations change. Learning changes. People are more familiar with how the process works, so they don't think about that so much. They want to look more at the outputs of it, or they may start asking more searching questions and test you even more. So it comes down to the the maturity changes. The risk management maturity of the organisation changes. So it's an evolutionary type of process. It's not like, you know, we moved to point B and we've arrived and that's it, job's done. It's never going to be like that. So opportunities for improvement, more effective reporting. So instead of having these sheets and sheets of information, well, let's just work out a way of just giving us what's really important. Moving the risk management team from internal audit. So if you remember, the risk management team was reporting up through Treasury and the CFO. So this process was moved to the risk management team away from internal audit. That gave internal audit an opportunity to review the process and critique the process and report that through. I think one thing that they found was there was very little linkage to operational risk management processes, health and safety. I mean, if we go back, let's just go back to corporate structure. If you think about this corporate structure, we can see in here, if you sort of, you can't see it, but there are silos of risk management occurring within this area. So Treasury are doing some risk management activities. Anybody think of a risk management activity that Treasury is doing? Sorry? Controlling the financial? Yeah, raising capital. Yeah, I'm thinking about how would they manage risk around that? What activities would they do to manage the risk around raising capital or managing? Yeah, well, they've got enough money coming in. Yeah, and out. So making sure their cash flow, is managed. Yeah. Anybody else? Any other? I'm sorry. Head office operations and front office operations? Yeah, what's the risk management process?
Basically, we were saying the trade and transactions that happen with the GLS are separated from what was the backup.
Okay, yeah, so you're yeah, okay, so what happens in the front office, the smaller transactions, or the big transactions are separated, you're saying, from the treasury transactions, yeah, okay. Anyone else? I mean, hedging is a risk management activity that goes on, so, if you're dealing with foreign currency fluctuations, you can hedge your transactions, futures markets, managing purchase of raw materials and the like. Are all risk management functions. So insurance, obviously, it's another sort of silo of risk management activity where you're transferring risk to a third party or sharing risk with an insurance company. Now, tax. Has anybody got any thoughts on tax and risk management? Any thoughts? Is risk management an issue for tax? Let's say a show of hands. Put up your hand if you think tax need to manage their risk. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a few. Put up your hand if you don't think tax is a major risk. 1, maybe. Okay. Well, actually, managing tax is quite a risk for organisations. If you speak to any tax manager for an organisation like this, it's right up on his radar. When you get into managing tax for large organisations, there's a lot of ways you can interpret transactions, and if you're how can you say if you have a very aggressive tax strategy, you can leave yourself open. Well, not leave yourself open, but you tend to encourage the tax office more to come and have a closer look at you. Now, once they come and have a closer look at you, then, that's probably not really a great thing. It's a real pain. It costs a lot of money. You can actually buy insurance against it. But it's a big problem for organisations if they've got the tax office crawling over them because, the tax office goes, well, if you've done this one dodgy deal, that we don't agree with, well, maybe there's another dodgy deal hiding in there somewhere that we might come and have a look at as well. So risk is a key part of tax management for large organisations. You've got to sort of sail as close to the wind as you can to get sort of best sort of benefits, but not too close that the tax office starts looking at you in a suspicious way. So managing that risk is a very important part of managing tax within large corporations. Legal. Any thoughts on risk silos for legal? Any? Yeah.
Producing contracts that are not legally reviewed, then companies have massive exposure.
Exactly.
Financially, as well.
Yeah, contract management, legal issues associated with contract management. If you're not managing your contractual relationships well, you open yourselves up for all sorts of losses and lost opportunities as a result. So So legal, is a risk management silo to manage all of that transfer of contractual risk. So yeah, health, safety, and environment. I mean, any thoughts on that? So, yeah. What were the? Yeah. So if you don't manage health and safety properly, yeah, you open yourselves up for financial losses, yeah, reputational losses. I mean, in Australia. That's right. You've got legal requirements to follow. In Australia, directors are personally liable for health, potentially for health and safety health and safety failures. So that's a key part. And similarly with the environment, management of the environment, there's a risk management aspect to managing the environment and sustainability issues. And we'll talk more about sustainability in the coming weeks. So as you can see, we've got these silos of risk management. Now, what we want to do with the enterprise risk management process is to try and integrate these silos of risk management more closely. And if we've got sort of significant health and safety risks that are lurking in the organisation, to help flush those out and report them up if necessary to the top of the organisation. Similarly with Treasury. And I mean, M&A. Didn't talk about M&A. Major risk. We talked about in week 1 or 2. One of the major, probably the biggest detractors of value from an organisation. If you make poor M&A decisions, that's going to take more off your bottom line probably than any other risk in the organisation. So the resources that we're putting into managing risk in these different silos, need to be equivalent. Are we putting too much effort minimising currency risks? But yet we've got huge deductibles on our insurance, which don't make sense perhaps. So we can, if we can sort of see where the risk management resources are going for the organisation and focus on areas where perhaps they need more, maybe look at areas where they're over managing the risk. One of the conversations I had once with some guys at Standard & Poor's was interesting. I was talking about risk management, and he said, well, to give you a bit of background, large organisations like this will have a credit rating. So Standard & Poor's or similar organisations will come and look at you, and they'll give you a credit rating, AAA or A, B, B or B plus or whatever it is. And what they're doing is they're saying, how good are you? If an organisation lends you money, how good a risk are you to pay that money back? And some people's initial idea is that an organisation should be AAA rated, such that they should have very little risk, and their risk profile, if you like, is very, very good. But if you're a manufacturing organisation or you're out there trying to make money, if you don't take any risk, then you're not really going to make much money. So if you see a manufacturing organisation or a commercial organisation, probably not a bank necessarily, but a commercial organisation which is AAA rated, they're probably not taking enough risk. So they're not they haven't got enough debt. Perhaps they're not carrying enough debt. Maybe they should be carrying a bit more debt. So often there's this fine balance in organisations to find a credit rating which is not too risk averse, but then it's not taking too much risk either. So it's finding that right balance. If their credit rating is too low, it's going to cost them a lot of money to borrow any more money. So that's something to consider. It's not always in the best interest to be AAA necessarily, but that's probably a debate and a conversation for another time. Okay, some feedback. Yeah, some of the major changes that these guys experienced was they put risk champions into business units. these champions were then to lead the process within the units, educate people internally. The process was simplified a lot. As pretty much as we've talked about here, in terms of simplifying the process. Ownership of risk is enforced. The other thing that I've put in down here is dashboards with key indicators. I haven't spoken much about key risk indicators, but a lot of the risks that are identified in these processes are sort of more chronic than acute, meaning that they last for a long time. An organisation such, they said the price of raw materials, the oil price. Well, if you're making plastic bottles, that's always going to be a risk for your organisation. It's a long-term risk. So to see how the organisation is tracking and managing that risk, key risk indicators can be developed. And so a key risk indicator may be the price of oil or the volatility in the price of oil. And so when we're reviewing the risk, we can then get an idea of where the indicators are going, either on a day-to-day or a month-by-month basis. And you can set up a whole range of key risk indicators on a dashboard. So you can track the important indicators for the risks that are being managed in the organisation. And that's something that the senior management team are really keen on. Almost like a one-page, give you a one-pager that just includes, key risk indicators and give you an idea of some of these risks getting worse, some of these getting better, or other factors that I need to be aware of. Okay. All right. Now let's take a 10-minute break, and when we come back, I'll talk to pretty much wrap up this little story. We'll talk about some of the other processes, talk about COSO, we'll go that a bit more detail, and then a bit on site too. So I'll see you in 10 minutes. Okay, let's get started again, and we can head off home. Okay, so we're talking about like that case study of that large multinational organisation. I just really want to sort of conclude sort of the experience of that journey, and it is a journey. This enterprise, that whole enterprise risk management topic, if you like, is about a journey organisations go through. So there's no organisation out there that has perfect enterprise risk management. I had a meeting with BHP last year, and BHP is probably recognised as one of the major enterprise leaders in enterprise risk management. And I was really surprised when I was speaking to the risk manager there, and she said, have you got any ideas how we can improve our risk management? And she wanted to get some dialogue and discussion going on how to further improve risk management. So that was an interesting message to me, because I was thinking, well, shit, these guys are like the leaders of all the other organisations that I know, and they're asking me for ideas. And so it made me think that it doesn't matter how far along, if you like, the journey you are, there's always opportunities for improvement. There's always going to be opportunities to improve how risk management is put into organisations. So it's never over. I think some of the sort of takeaways from this sort of experience has been let's keep the process simple. We're here to talk about the risks in the organisation. We're not here to talk about the risk management process. Okay, so the more simple the process is, the easier it is to use it, the more effective we can use our time to talk about key issues that the business faces. I think the other thing that happened, if I flick back to the organisation structure, insurance and risk was reporting up through Treasury at the CFO, and in its original role, that was probably the best place to be. It was heavily finance orientated with self-insurance programs and the like. But what happened with enterprise risk coming into that team, they decided that things needed to be improved. And insurance and risk, we have health and safety over here as well, which is another sort of major risk area. And they decided to link those two together, so they were put together in one organisation and actually reported up through the company secretary. It was good in some respects, and sort of the downside in others. And the downside was that insurance function was still, heavy financial function, and it was a little bit more disconnected from the CFO. However, I guess on the plus side, the health and safety, risk issues, and risk management process was aligned with the wider enterprise risk process. The sustainability and environment activities were then all brought under the same umbrella. And the other thing was the company secretary was actually a lot closer to the CEO than perhaps the head of Treasury, who that risk function was reporting through. So there's been some significant changes in the way risk was managed, and respected the fact that risk management was a key part of the CEO's group. Hey guys, just a word. I'm sitting here talking, and there's probably feel like there's about 10 people coming in after we started. Just for the benefit of everybody, you can get back here after 10 minutes. Instead of disturbing the lecture, that would be appreciated. All right, now Now, I want to move on and go back to some of the methodologies that we're skip through that one. The risk management process is can be used and provide as guidance documents. Now, I put this slide up here just as a reminder. I think I put this up in lecture 1, what I'm making this point here is there's different types of risks in the organisation, and we need different processes to manage those risks. And so we've got strategic risks, which are sort of appearing at the top of the organisation, and then we've got more operational and compliance and finance, compliance and reporting risks down below. And the tools that we use, so the strategic type of risk issues, they're decision-based, and for compliance and reporting risks, they're generally rule-based. So think of it in terms of, if you're making a strategic decision, you're not going to base that strategic decision necessarily on rules. It's going to be good decisions. And similarly, for compliance, a simple compliance business process issue, it's going to be a rule-based risk management process in place there. So the risk management process changes through the organisation, and I guess we need to keep that in mind. Now, when we've spoken, you've looked at the risk management process in assignment 1, and you'll be familiar with this process now, assessing the risk, and establishing the context, identifying, analysing, evaluating, and treating the risk as part of the risk management process. Now, when we come on to thinking of enterprise risk in the organisation as a whole, we need to take a slightly different approach and think about how we manage these different types of risks. So, ISO 31000 has been a good starting point and a good way forward for organisations. Previously, they only had AS 4360 to work with. We didn't really look at frameworks as opposed to processes. I guess that's the key thing. Framework is different to a process. A process is part of the framework. Other processes, other frameworks that are out there, and I want to talk about now. We've got talk about COSO, which I've mentioned earlier tonight. This one, Casualty Actuarial Society, Enterprise Risk Management. It's sort of a process there, a framework there. The Victorian Government Risk Management Framework. There's also a federal government risk management framework as well, but these are sort of public sector frameworks. And then consultants and software vendors will all be very happy to offer you their frameworks as well. So if you're a risk manager out there, if you're a risk manager trying to put in enterprise risk management, this is probably where you would start to work out what's best for your organisation. So let's have a look at some of them. Well, you should be familiar with ISO 31000, and this is the framework pretty much that ISO 31000 puts forward. And it's a good framework. It's a good generic process which will fit pretty much to any organisation. Now, some may criticise it and say, well, look, it's too generic, it's too flexible, it doesn't really give me enough detail, it's all too pie-in-the-sky stuff. But there are some important points that come out of it. One thing to note, and I think you should recognise, particularly for assignment 2, is at the end of ISO 31000, there's a thing called Annex A, and that describes what an organisation looks like if it's got good risk management or good enterprise risk management. So it's a bit of a sort of opportunity to benchmark maturity of the organisation. So I'm not going to talk too much about ISO 31000 because we covered that, I think, last week. Now this COSO ERM, now, as I mentioned before, it's associated with the Sarbanes-Oxley. That's probably sort of relationship in America. It's driven out of the US. COSO stands for Committee of Sponsoring Organisations. I don't know, I think Friendway Commission or something, but everyone just calls it COSO. And there's two parts to COSO. There's the COSO internal integrated framework, which is what the Sarbanes-Oxley stuff was built off the back of, which is focused on financial reporting. It's purely a process associated with ensuring the good quality of financial reports. And the way it's sort of set up here is operations, finance operations, financial reporting and compliance. So it's got these sort of this cube. And then it looks at them in another dimension: monitoring, information, communication, control activities, risk assessment, control environment. And then down the side, you may not be able to read, but it's a Unit A, Unit B, Activity 1, Activity 2. So it's looking at, within the organisation, what are the financial reporting processes within those different units. So it's a way of sort of slicing and dicing internal controls and risks associated with producing accurate, timely, and auditable accounts. Now that concept was then taken to another level and say, we're talking about financial risks here. Let's look at the risks through the whole organisation. And as you can see, these two things look very much similar, but there's some subtle differences. Along the top, we've got strategic operations, reporting, compliance, and actually, I might go to the next slide to put it a little bit bigger. And then down the front, we've got internal environment where you can read those. And then at the side, we've got subsidiary, business unit, division, entity level. So it's a bit like an organisational sort of structure. So at the front, you've got entity level, so that's sort of corporate, division. Then you've got, which might be your business unit. Then you've got this here, division. Larger organisations might be division, then business unit, and then subsidiary. So it's sort of cascading down through the organisation. Now, one of the things I haven't done this week is set up the notes on the website. I'll do those. I'll try to do those tonight. And give you the notes. Now, in the notes, there's a definition of what COSO thinks enterprise risk management is, and it talks a little bit about what strategic operations reporting compliance means. Now, I'll just read that out for you. Now, it's associated with the achievement of objectives, and I think this is a good thing, that we're now talking about objectives in terms of enterprise risk management. So, strategic is high-level goals aligned with supporting its mission. Operations, the effective and efficient use of resources. Reporting, reliability of reporting, and compliance with applicable laws and regulations. So it's fairly obvious that looking at sort of risk issues associated with each of those. So again, looking at a bit like a cascade triangle that we looked at before. Now on the front here, the internal environment, objective setting, event identification. Well, you probably noticed some similarities there with the Australian standard 4360. Internal environment, it's a bit like context. Objective setting, well, that's the sort of context stuff as well. Risk identification, risk assessment, response, control activities, mitigation, treating the risk, information communication, and monitoring. So there's some similarities between the standards there, which you'll notice. There have been all sorts of discussions within the risk management community, and some people like COSO because it's probably one of the only enterprise risk frameworks that provides a bit of guidance, a bit of detail, actually says to organisations, well, let's think about risk at entity level or business unit level. Let's think about it in terms of strategic, operational, compliance risk, break it down, as opposed to the Australian standard or ISO, which is a bit more generic. However, the people at the Australian standards would say, the ISO standards would say, well, this is too detailed. An organisation, may need something more flexible, and we want to give them that. Some organisations don't have this entity level of subsidiary and all this type of stuff. So, it's not really appropriate. And there's some other criticisms. Just to summarise, it's derived from the Integrated Control Framework, and de facto enterprise risk management standard for SOX, compliance organisations, US-based organisations, larger organisations. It's widely accepted. Provides quite a prescriptive approach, so some people like that. They just want to be told, tell us what to do, and we'll just go and do it. And it's a methodology for enterprise risk. Now, on the downside, it's difficult to apply. It's been great for consultants because organisations are going to say this is too complicated. Bring consultants in and let them do it for us. It misses opportunity risk issues. It was written by a bunch of auditors or financial type people, so it tends to be have a bias towards audit and compliance, financial risks. So it's got its critics. Okay, Casualty and Actuarial Society. This was an early paper that they put together. It's about 2002. Really, it's fairly basic, fairly naive. I think, given what we know now about enterprise risk and the importance of getting leadership buy-in and structuring frameworks, it's a little bit naive. It talks a little bit. This one tends to get a bit more into quantitative methods to manage risk. You may know that actuaries tend to like numbers and crunch numbers and like distributions. So there's a bit of sort of fancy stuff in there. It's not a long paper. It's probably only about 10 pages long. But it has got some practical and useful information. I've just noted some down here in the notes. Some of the practical considerations of implementing ERM, designating an ERM champion, making ERM part of the enterprise culture, tearing down the silos, determining all the possible risks of the organisation, quantifying operational and strategic risks, integrating risks, determining dependencies and the likes, organisations, a lack of appropriate risk transfer mechanisms, so where there should be more insurance or better management of contracts, monitoring of the process. It also recommends that start slowly and build on success. And that's all good stuff, and I'll wholly support all of that. Now, the next one is the Victorian Government Risk Management Framework. I mentioned this one because I think it's important for you to understand that enterprise risk is not just about listed organisations, it's not just about commercial organisations, it's about publicly funded organisations like governments and other entities. Although they don't have sort of the same set of shareholders and return on investments that most listed organisations do, I guess public organisations' reputation is probably their biggest sort of potential impact. So if you talk to the senior people in a large government agency or government department, talk about what their risks are. Their risks are things like embarrassing a minister, or having a royal commission associated with something that happens within their department. It may be adverse questions in Parliament. It might be the embarrassment of a member of Parliament. So it's these reputational issues that tend to come to the fore. So they're looking at mitigating or managing reputational risk across governance within these government agencies. In Victoria, for example, I'll just talk about Victoria because that's probably what I'm most familiar with, and it's similar across the other states. Is that the Department of Treasury and Finance put a risk management framework out in 2007. Now, every large agency in Victoria and government department has to produce an annual report. Now, they don't have the same reporting or governance requirements that listed agencies do with ASX principles as we've got for governance. So this document effectively helped lead through some governance issues, particularly around risk management. Now, what the requirement was for the annual reports to have what they call an attestation statement. Now, the attestation statement needs to be signed off by the CEO or the board of directors along the lines to include that agencies have a risk management process in place which is consistent with the Australian standard or equivalent, ISO. These processes are effective in controlling the risks to a satisfactory level, and a responsible body or audit committee verifies that view. And that's statement that's signed off and included in the annual report. So if you were to go and dig up any annual report from a government, Victorian government entity, you'd find something that effect now in those reports. So enterprise risk is important, and the Victorian government framework is driving that. So if you're working within government or wanting to do some reviews of government in terms of risk management, that's a good place to start. Now, I just also mentioned one of the things that these government organisations face, which probably other organisations don't face in terms of risk. Listed here, agency risk, interagency risk, and statewide risk. What I mean by those, agency risk is probably the typical risk that the agency or department might face. So, loss of a key member of staff, project not sort of delivering what's expected, that type of thing. So really associated just with that agency. Interagency risks would be risks where one agency has a relationship with another, and we've got some classic interagency risks playing out at the moment with the Royal Commission bushfires, where we've got the police who are working with the DSE, emergency guys, and other emergency services to produce this disaster response plan that didn't work as well as it should. And so the failure potentially of one agency is having an impact on another agency. IT issues may be another way, but one agency providing IT support or information which is being used by another. So that's one way. Finance, the Department of Treasury and Finance providing financial support to another agency. So you've got these interdependency risks, and then statewide risks are more kind of risks that affect the whole state, which may be affect all agencies. I mentioned IT; that could be potentially a statewide risk because now they're managing IT for a central agency providing IT support to all agencies. Other risks may be climate change. So here's a risk: climate change is going to potentially have an impact on every department within Victoria. So this process of this risk management framework is designed to help draw out these risks so that the government are better enabled to understand what impacts exist and can help in the future. I've just listed here consultants and vendors and some examples of some papers. Now I'm going to share these papers with you shortly. But this is another common way for organisations to start putting enterprise risk into their organisation, where we go to the consultant and ask for some help. And pretty much every consultant has probably got their own methodology, and it's probably in their eyes the best methodology. And so keep that in mind. Now, in general, they're quite good. But I guess in my experience, some of the consultants tend to overcomplicate the process. It may be that they haven't had that much experience managing the project on an ongoing basis. They come in and they set it all up, and once it's set up, they walk away. It also may be an opportunity for them to justify the fees that they're charging. Depends who you talk to, how much of a cynic you are against those consultants. And there's some papers here which give an introduction, but generally, I would say that most of the consultants are pretty much spot on in the approach and what they're trying to achieve. In terms of, I've said vendors. I guess I'm thinking of software vendors. I think software vendors are probably one of the biggest dangers, I think, to effective enterprise risk management within organisations. Again, from my experience, I guess the story often goes: an organisation wants to put risk management into their company. And they developed a bit of a process fairly early on, sort of in the maturity curve. And they thought, well, if we get a software system, I'm thinking of one example. Oh yeah, we need a software system. So they go and talk to a software vendor, software people, and they say, okay, we need this database which collects risks, and it collects controls, so we can link risks to controls, and we can link controls to action plans. We need it to produce some nice, pretty pictures, and we need a bit of this and a bit of that. And so this software vendor goes, yeah, no problem. So he designs this system for that organisation. That organisation has got different structures, visions, and business units, business groups. So who is this complexity in? And then says, oh, look, our risk management process, we look at likelihood in these different frequency ranges. We look at consequence in these different areas. We look at environmental, financial, reputational sort of metrics and materiality levels. And we need this and we need that. So this thing gets quite complicated, and then the vendor says, well, look, this is getting quite expensive. How about I do a deal with you? What do you mean? Well, instead of charging you the full price for this software, I'll charge you, say, a fraction, maybe 30%, provided you give me the right to be able to sell this to other people. And that's a good deal for the company, that's the program, and that's a great business opportunity for the software vendor. So the software vendor then, says, great, okay, wrap up the product and sell it to somebody else. So he then goes off saying, hey, look, we've put enterprise risk in for this other organisation, and we use this software system, and it's wonderful, and you just buy this software system, and then you can have enterprise risk. Now, the danger is that the different organisations may not be appropriate. So the fit may not be good for the software. That the other company or another company may not realise some of the complexity that's reflected in the software. So you get these software packages going out there, sort of being offered to the market, which may not necessarily be a good fit. There's also people out there in organisations who are of the opinion, oh, look, I'll just buy some software and that'll fix it, that'll give me enterprise risk management. So I just spend some money, get some software, switch it on, and we'll have enterprise risk management. Now, as you're probably aware, that doesn't really work very well because you've got a lot of change management issues, you've got a lot of leadership, support from senior leadership and the like. So there's a lot of vendors out there who are offering sort of packages which they say will bring you enterprise risk management, just by putting it on your computer and switching it on, which may not necessarily be the best thing for you. people that needed to be educated on how to work this software system. And we just said, no, thank you. We knew that wouldn't work. Because within the organisation, we tried to roll something like that out, it would immediately get feedback and be a big waste of money. So for this large multinational, we actually had no software. We just kept the process extremely simple. We knew that it was going to evolve, and we just kept it, just on some basic spreadsheets to keep it simple. Other organisations I've spoken to have had these very big risk management processes or big software systems and struggled with them. I've been into organisations that consulted simplifying their software systems for them. Software is a bit of a sort of buyer beware area. And if you're in a role where you're looking to put enterprise risk management into, probably don't go down the software track until you've been working with enterprise risk probably for a couple of years minimum. So you go that iteration process, that evolution process, and start to focus on what you really want to handle. Now, we talked about enterprise risk being a journey. Now, it's sometimes useful to be able to measure where organisations are along that journey. Sometimes we call it enterprise risk management maturity. And it's a challenge. How do you measure enterprise risk management maturity? Now, those of you who have looked at assignment 2 will probably be thinking, yeah, this sounds like assignment 2. You'll be right. We're interested in you trying to come up with some processes to measure enterprise risk maturity in the organisation. Different industries, are going to have different organisational structures. And a lot of you are doing finance, and you'll recognise that the way organisations, financial organisations are structured, different types of risks, and the approach to risk is going to be different to maybe manufacturing organisations or insurance companies or other non-financials. Different approaches, we talked about COSO, ISO, people have slightly different approaches. The approach you take, self-audit, independent audit. I mean, just a word on that, another story on that was when I was a risk manager, we were approached by Standard & Poor's, and they said, we want to develop an assessment, a way to assess risk management maturity for non-financial organisations. I said, yeah, fine, okay, that's all good. And their approach was to use a questionnaire. So they sent us this questionnaire, and it says, do you have this structure? Do you have that structure? Tell us a bit about this. Tell us a bit about that. How mature is your approach to this, your approach to that? And we filled it all in, and we sent it off, and they came back and they said, your risk maturity is this. And we were we reflected on that. And, I open to you. Anybody got any thoughts as to how meaningful self-assessment technique might be in terms of risk management? Anybody? Any thoughts on that? How if I assess myself, send the results in. Let's say the assignments. If I was to ask you guys to assess your assignments yourselves and send me the results, and I'll do a bit of benchmarking on that, some scoring. What do you think? A bit biased. Yeah. Probably. I mean, how many H3s do you think there'd be? So you all think you're pretty good. Now, take that logic, to the next step. If I did an assessment of you, and let's say you were all undergraduate students, and you've done an assignment as an undergraduate student in your first year, and then you've done an assessment of yourselves when you're a third year student, you'd probably be more critical of yourself, I would say, in the third year, such that you've been in university for 3 years now. The standard of your work is probably expected to be high. You understand how the system works. Your depth of knowledge is improved. But if you're so what I'm saying is, if an organisation has been doing enterprise risk management for 1 year, they're probably a little bit naive and probably think they're doing a really great job. It's all going really well. Yeah, we're doing really well. If you've been doing it for 3 years, you probably recognise the fact that, this isn't as easy as I thought it was in my first year. So I'll actually mark myself down a bit more. The way you self-assess not only is advised because you're doing it yourself, it's also going to be relative to how long or how mature you are as an organisation in the process. You'll probably be tougher on yourself the more mature you are compared to piece. So these were some of the sort of our feelings in terms of how that process was working. Now, if like your assessments, if there's some kind of outcome for you associated with this self-assessment, like if this is a standard of Poor's assessment and this is going to potentially influence the way they rate you in terms of your credit rating, you're going to be a little bit more biased that you say you're probably better than you are, because if you don't, you may be losing out to your competitors who are even more biased than you. So that was some of the things, and then looking at independent audits, what type of people would be the best people to do independent audits? If you had auditors come into the organisation to ask questions and do the audit, what kind of experience might those people need? Should they be financial auditors, people who are normally doing financial audits? Should they be sort of more business improvement people, change management people? Who should be doing these sorts of independent audits? And the other aspect, I guess, is about stakeholders. We've got lots of different stakeholders interested in the outcomes of enterprise risk management. The board are obviously interested. They're interested in where their organisation is benchmarked against their peer groups and other organisations. Mentioned Standard & Poor's, the rating agencies are interested to see where you're at. In terms of sustainability reporting, some of the stakeholders associated with sustainability are going to be interested in where the risk management maturity of the organisation sits. So they've all got their different expectations as to what's important for them and how that should be scored. So there's some challenges, and I want to open that challenge up to you guys in the second slide. Okay. All right. Now, in assignment 2, I guess I'm interested in I've got 2 options. A quantitative model to assess enterprise risk maturity in non-financial organisations, or review the enterprise maturity of a real organisation. Now we did this last year with this unit, and it was a big challenge for a lot of students, and but the results were fantastic. We actually only did the second one, so I asked everybody to go out and review enterprise risk management maturity in a real organisation. And a lot of overseas students, they went and contacted companies over in China and other places that they were familiar with, and pulled information back in from there. And it was a great way if people were starting to look for jobs to go out and contact organisations who maybe they're thinking about working with, and was a great opportunity. The quality of the work was excellent. I had reports coming in as a consultant. I'd be very happy to put to a client. It was right up there in that sort of standard. This year I thought, I'd give you guys a break. For those of you who don't want to go out and talk to companies or who don't feel confident to do that. But the first one, the model to assess economic maturity is quite a tough challenge. It's been tried, with mixed success in organisations, and there's not a huge amount of research material out there to go and dig up. But what I will do is I'm going to share with you a packet of documents which will get you started. I think what I want to do with these assignments, the whole purpose is it's worth about 40%, I think, of your whole assignment for this unit. So we're pushing you a bit on this, but I think by doing this and doing your own independent research will help you realise that this ERM stuff is not, just stuff you learn in a textbook and then regurgitate in an exam. It's living and breathing, and it varies between organisations, and there's a lot of different opinions out there. So this is one of the reasons why there's a lot of papers in this to read, a lot of reading associated with this unit. There's no definite right or wrong answers. There's no sort of black or white, sort of yes, this is right, this is wrong. There's a lot of strong opinion. One, weight of experience associated with it, and there's a contrary opinion out there as well. So this is a great, I think, a great opportunity for those of you who really want to learn a bit more about how organisations work. In my work, I'm amazed how interesting it is. I'm currently working a large company. I don't want to give too much away, but one of the top 40 ASX, and I'm developing business continuity plans for the whole group, and that takes me throughout the whole organisation, looking at all their key business processes, right through the organisation, holding meetings with all the executives, and it's fascinating. It's an opportunity to find out how this whole organisation works, looking at the politics that drive the organisation or prevent the organisation from working, finding out some of the major risks that are going on there. So if you're interested in getting a bit more into risk management, you're the sort of person that likes sort of challenges and diversity. This is a great way to go. So this is the challenge for you. I'll be interested to see how many of you decide to take up the challenge of going out and talking to an organisation. How many of you just want to do the quantitative model? Which one's easier? I would probably say the second one's easier. I think why is it easier? Because you just have to ask a lot of questions and give the answers. With the first one, you've really got to go out there and decide, what am I trying to do here? How does the real big picture work? What are the driving factors? There's a lot more analysis and work to do the first one well. I mean, you can do the first one badly, very easily. It's up to you whether you want to do the second very easily. But the other thing is, if you decide to do the first one, you're going to be competing with everybody else. So the playing field is a lot more level. If you go with the second one, chances are the company you pick and you've got to know, they're not going to be talking to anyone else. So you'll get some much more unique information, which will provide a much more interesting paper. We're really interested in getting think from last year, what I found was when people went out and spoke to the risk managers, that they started to get the stories about risk management and how it works in organisations, and looking at the documents and the challenges, and it really sort of opened people's eyes. It's not that simple. Now, in terms of the type of organisation to look at, for the second one, don't go to the big banks. Don't go to the big financial institutions. They're too big. You may find you go talk to somebody about one small part of their three-pillar approach. But that's not going to give you the depth or the understanding of organisations-wide risk management you're interested in. I would err on much smaller organisations. Even organisations like local councils, government organisations are fantastic for this type of stuff. They've all got to have a risk management process. I think in Victoria there's about 250 entities which have to have a risk management process. So a lot of them really struggle with this. And if you came knocking on their door saying, "I'd like to talk to you about enterprise risk management," they'd probably say, "Yeah, come on in because we need some help with this." We can't afford the big consultants. We don't want to go down that track. So it's an opportunity to help them become a consultant. So yeah. So there's some opportunities. Some of you, I think, particularly the distance students who are already working for an organisation, perfectly placed to look at risk management within their organisation. Some of the questions I've had in the past. Confidentiality. Any information that's provided with the work will remain confidential and be returned. So we're not going to be putting it on any public websites or sharing with other students or anything like that. It's very much any information that you include in your assignments remains confidential within that assignment. If you need a letter from us, we're very happy to provide that. If the organisation doesn't want to share anything with you until they have that, that's fine. I would suggest don't leave, if you're doing number 2 or any of these, don't leave until the last minute. If you're trying to deal with another company, people are very busy. They often don't have time available, so you need to get in the diaries at a very early stage. Often you might get knocked back, so it's important for you to start early. So if you're looking at I would recommend doing number 2. If you're going to do number 2, get out there, get on the phones, get on the email, get talking to people as soon as possible, because it does take a long time, and you haven't got a long time. So beware of that. Anybody got any general questions?
What's the minimum size?
Just the first one is non-financial organisations. So again, talking about government organisations and entities like that.
That's right. Government organisations, manufacturing, other sort of commercial. We're not just purely finance driven.
I just had a quick second one, if I may.
Yeah.
For the second one, you talked about the size of an organisation. Obviously, banks, I understand. But what about a relatively large organisation in supply chain, retail?
Definitely. Yeah. Go for it.
Are you talking headcount of multiple thousands?
Yeah. If you can pick up a company like that, and generally, if it's got a full-time risk manager, that's the sort of organisation size to go for.
But I'm assuming one of how good the assignment is if you go forward with the risk management. So if you try and go out, because the risk manager is obviously the obvious one who's going to tell you a good story and how well they're going, right?
Yeah, so the risk manager may be a little bit biased on how his risk management process is, yeah.
So would you, I can't remember the word, reward a more broader analysis?
Look, I think it's a good question. I mean, if you have that opportunity to speak to the risk manager, get a copy of their framework document to see what kind of process they're using internally. That's definitely the place to start, and you'll be on for a good mark to sort of get to that point. If you can sort of broaden it, well, HD, here you come. If you can reflect that you've done a good deal of research, depth of research to support your findings, that's really what we're looking for. Yeah. I think one thing to note, word count. Someone mentioned word count. Forget what word count is. 3,000 words. 3,000 words isn't a huge amount. Might sound a lot, but it's not a huge amount for a project like this. And people have said, look, we've got hold of these documents, maybe we've got hold of this framework, I'd like to include it as an appendices. That's not going to be included in the word count. If you've had say, phone conversations or you've had meetings, include your meeting notes as an appendix. If you in your paper are writing something like keep it really simple. They don't have a very effective risk management approach or something like that. That's if I'm reading that, I'm going to be going, well, on what basis are you making these statements? Right? And if you've got something in the appendix that supports that, to say that so in your paper you said they haven't got a very good risk management approach based upon the way their framework is structured, based upon a conversation with risk manager, at a certain time, and then you could, you can put a transcript script or something in the conversation. So what I'm looking for in the paper is something that supports the arguments that you're putting forward. Okay? So it shows the difference between somebody who's just sat in their room at home and made it all up, against somebody who's actually been out there and had conversations, who's read documents, got hold of documents, reviewed stuff, gone to the library, research stuff. So I mean that's what we're looking for. If I can't see that sort of basis of support coming through from the appendix or coming through from other research that you've done, then I can't easily give you credit for it. Okay? So I think that's a really important thing to support your findings and prove it. Because I'm not in a position to judge apart from what's in the appendix or what's in your list of readings and research. So keep that in mind. There has been a tendency in the past to just say stuff, and it may be well founded, but unless you tell me how you found that out, then I can't really give you credit for that compared to somebody who's just made it all up. So yeah.
Yeah, can we just pick up a small company? Or do we need a company with a whole structure of ACM?
Can you use a small company? Yeah, you can use a small company.
Even only with 15 staff.
If it's got 15 staff, to be honest, I think that's too small. So we don't want to have this my level of home shop. This is the enterprise risk management framework. And I think, which kind of leads on to another point. If somebody said to me, I want to do it for Bunnings. I want to do an enterprise risk framework for Bunnings. Well, Bunnings is a business unit of Wesfarmers, right? So the enterprise risk management process for Bunnings is going to be the Wesfarmers risk management process. So you should be looking at the Wesfarmers risk management process, not the Bunnings risk management process. If you're going down that track. Yeah.
First one, model. What kind of data exposed can you do that?
Okay, that's good. Now, what am I doing? Okay, let's take a 10-minute break. Let's be back here at 10 past.
I'll be back here, so there's no doors hanging when we get started. And I want to share with you some documents which will help you with the first part.
I just know I've got a train crash now. I'm basically representing so it's going to be right, and I've got to do all of that the whole load of things. Yeah, basically it's just because I'm doing another on you as well, another 3 months. So I just know May the 12th, I know when I'm home.
Just drop me an email so you've got something in writing. I don't need to go through the process. And how much do you want? Just note on there what you'd like.
7 days, I think.
Yeah, that's fine. Just put that down.
And if all goes well, I do want to try and do it. When your headspace is clear, then
I want to read something.
yeah, well, let's go. Exactly. Alright, thanks a lot. Cheers.
Yeah, okay. What I suggest you the company name. I'd say to you, be careful that if it's a hospital, if it's have their own board of directors. I would say one hospital, I have other hospitals. Which is going to drive all of this management. Manage the risk through the rest of the organisation. So I would focus on the corporate entity rather than you've got contacts at the hospital. So I'd like to review the risk management process. Others you need to talk to people who look after risk management at the office. Definitely try and go for it. Otherwise you'll be missing out.
Before we
Yep. Okay. All right. I don't know why the lights just went out then. I didn't touch anything. Let's see. Okay. All right. Now, I've put all these documents actually on DSO under DSA Home Assessment and then Assignment 2. And pretty much these are all available on the internet, but they're not, they'll take you a while to find. And I thought to give you all a better chance, but probably makes it even harder for everybody because everybody's got this information now. You maybe haven't found it yourselves, and maybe ahead of the rest, but everybody's got this information now. But I guess from my perspective, I'm interested in you guys learning as much as you can while you're on the unit. So it's in everybody's interest to have the opportunity to look at these documents. Now, I've talked quite a bit about Standard & Poor's today. Now, Standard & Poor's have been doing a lot of work in enterprise risk management analysis, and actually been putting together a tool for non-financials and the like. So really the assignment is similar to what Financial Reports have been doing. Give them a ring, they want to share it. COSO ERM exec summary, that's really an introduction to the COSO process, which you may find useful. It doesn't go into a lot of detail. I don't have a copy of the full COSO methodology, which runs into 200 and something pages. The InConsult ERM process, that's a very basic process on enterprise risk management from a consultancy company. RIMS, example, maturity assessment, okay. And the maturity model a bit further down. No, these aren't in any particular order. The two RIMS things go together. RIMS stands for Risk and Insurance Managers Society. It's a US-based organisation. They've been doing quite a lot of work in assessing ERM maturity. So if you're, ready both for this assignment, it doesn't matter whether option A or option B. That's going to be an important part of it. Understanding their approach to trying to assess and score risk maturity through their risk maturity model. CAS, that's Casualty Actuarial Society, ERM overview, that's an introduction to their risk management methodology, which we talked about today. Deloitte ERM done right, that's, so you're familiar with Deloitte, it's one of their papers on how to do ERM. It's really focused, it's a bit of a marketing document, but introducing ERM to companies as to what's important. And a lot of the stuff that we're covering in this unit will be included in there. Now, what I've also included here is ComCover survey questionnaire. Now, this is ComCover is the Commonwealth Government Insurance Company. So all the federal government agencies are insured through ComCover. They've got a self-insurance program, or buy reinsurance through that. And they've been benchmarking enterprise risk management for a few years now. A bit like we're talking about the Victorian government, RFQR, and just recently they put out a tender to change their process, or to change the way it was structured. They found that it could be improved, and part of that tender they included some information on how they were doing previously. So I got hold of some of that and included it here for you to see. So we've got the ComCover survey questionnaire, which is how they used to assess enterprise risk management maturity, and also a sample benchmark report that they will be issuing to their organisations. Now, keep in mind that that's a government organisation. It is non-financial, so I guess it's relevant. So I thought maybe we could just introduce you to a few of those documents. Now, oh yeah, someone asked me a question in the break. Could they have a sort of a sample letter that they could perhaps send to an organisation? Happy to provide that, but if that person just puts something on DSO, I'll respond to that, and then that should give you a bit of an introductory letter, or what to say or what to ask for if you're approaching organisations. Okay. Right. Let's have a look at. I'll just go through these quickly, one at a time, and then we'll have any questions. Now, this is a ComCover benchmarking questionnaire. Now, this questionnaire is sent out to the department. So the Department of Defence would receive this questionnaire, and they would pretty much fill it out themselves, and it's a self-assessment process. So let's just have a quick flick through, have a quick look at a couple of the questions. Details who's completing it, usual stuff. Which of the following best describes your agency? So, are we A, B, or C? Risk management is part of our day-to-day business, down to risk management is an integral part of good corporate governance. We've implemented a risk management framework, supplement review it. So it's trying to understand the maturity of where organisations are and their approach to it. I mean, one of the things to keep in mind is if you send someone a questionnaire, they say, A, we're very, very good at risk management, and B, C, D, we're hopeless. No one's really going to put, yeah, we're hopeless. So the way these questions are structured, they're structured in a way to try and pull out some of the sort of opportunities for improvement, should we say. So the way to do it. So, which of the following describes your risk management framework? So, how do you provide guidance on tolerable and unacceptable risks? So, here's a self-assessment questionnaire. Now, this one here. Okay, so this is sample agency benchmarking reporting or report. So this is what pretty much comes out of the questionnaire. Now, sometimes the questionnaires are also followed up with interviews, phone interviews, I think in this case. So there would be, I think they were doing a verification type of process, so that they would have the organisation fill out the questionnaire. The results would be then received by the ratings organisation. They would then call up people, discuss those results, and may even sort of ask for documents to review and the like. So there's all sorts of different ways to sort of checks and balances to be put in. But these are the sort of key result areas: risk management governance, risk sharing, business continuity management, communication and training, and monitoring review. And what was kind of quite interesting with these were sort of opportunities to benchmark all the different government agencies. Sort of a bit sort of amusing, but the ratings agency would send a draft copy of their findings to the organisation, and the organisation would have to agree with those findings. And so, if there was things in that review or that benchmarking process which the organisation didn't agree with, then the report couldn't be released or couldn't be included. So you could argue that potentially the independence of the results could be compromised. However, you've got to weigh that against the fact that through the process, if the questions hadn't been asked to the right people, then potentially the wrong information may have been gathered. So that opportunity for the organisation to review the findings was a way for them to hopefully weed out the fact that the wrong people have been answering questions or this information has been flying around. So that's a sort of another thing to keep in mind with these benchmarking processes is, are you asking the right people the questions? And what's the independence of the findings? Does the organisation have to get it signed off or not? So, so this is the outcome. So they come overall score. So this is a sort of a quantitative sort of approach, and then how that sort of works with different parts of the organisation. I did a similar risk management, or put it an operational risk review. This was for a large multinational telecom company a few years ago now, and they had all these telecom companies all around the world, and they didn't have too much of an idea of how good or bad risk management was with them, and they didn't know if there was any lurking nasties or sort of significant risks, and wanted to get a better handle on this. So what we developed was a risk rating process where a team of us went around. We worked in teams of 4. And so a team of 4 would arrive at an organisation, and we'd sit down and we'd have a chat with the risk manager and probably a couple of the executives and introduce the process. And then we'd go off as pairs, then we would interview key people in the organisation. And we had a list of set questions that we were asking. And we would rate their responses to these set questions on a scale of 1 to 4. And then we would have a weighting system to weight the importance of that question and come up with a total. We looked at a whole range of risk issues. We looked at health and safety. We looked at insurance. We looked at financial risk management. We looked at, this was a telecom company, so we looked at things called illegal network access or security issues associated with the phone system, how managing contracts. So as you imagine, we have all these sort of different compartments or silos of risk and assessing the management effectiveness of them all. We were then able to give them a percentage score for each of these silos, and then allocate an overall score for that business entity, or that company as a whole. That score for that company could then be compared against other companies within that whole business or that corporation. Some of the I guess challenges we had were that because we were all going out interviewing on a fairly subjective basis and putting scores against it, was we were worried that some auditors would be really hard-nosed and others would be really soft. So the hard ones would score companies low, and other people would maybe score too high. And we get this sort of variation occurring based on the types of auditors that were going around. So to mitigate that, what we did is we had a large number of questions, so that would hopefully spread that around. We had 2 people going through asking the questions, so that there wasn't just one individual having a relationship with the person in question. There was 2 people. We would then discuss the ratings as a pair after the interview, and then we'd also get together as a group of 4 and work together. We were a team. There was probably I think there was another 1 or maybe 2 teams of 4 working their way around the world, and we'd often swap people between the teams as well. So time around and we wanted to do it, we wanted the businesses to pay for it. And they said, well, look, we had it for free last time. We don't want to pay for it this time. That's a whole other argument you get into. But so there's some things to be aware of when you're going in and sort of trying to assess risk on through questions and answers, which is a sort of qualitative basis, and then converting that into numbers, quantitative basis that you need to be aware of. Yeah.
What you just described is exactly what we need to do with this assignment. Because, for example, you've given us a sample of questions we need to ask, right?
Yeah.
So we take that as guidelines, so make our own questions and send them to the company. And then from that, how do we deduce what the actual maturity of the ERM is based on the data we get from that? Because we want that to be subjective. I can take like a sample of this questionnaire, right, and then send it my own kind of questions like that, and subjective information. I'm not reflect the true representation of what ERM is.
Yeah. Okay. Good question. If you're doing the assignment where you're approaching a company and you're assessing their maturity, what I would probably suggest you do is you pick something. I would probably base it against the RIMS maturity model. There's a copy of that. I'll come to that in a moment. Now, if you've got another maturity model that you want to use, or you want to develop your own, or something, I haven't got a problem with that. Do something that's reasonable. So that's probably the first part of your question. So the other aspect is if you're doing the assignment where you're looking at a benchmarking process for any organisation, what I'd be interested in is understanding how you would go about it. What would be the approach? Not necessarily what the questions are going to be, but what would be the approach? What are the potential pitfalls? How you would potentially sort of go out there and set this thing up, maybe with some examples of how the scoring system might work, or what might be a good approach, or what might not be a good approach. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. So that's the ComCover one. So let's take a look at where is it? RIMS. There we go. Okay, this is let's get rid of this thing. The risk management maturity model for enterprise risk management. So this is the RIMS. So that was the first part of your question. This is a lot of students last year used this to benchmark the organisations that they went out and looked at, and it's it's probably an easy way to go. Now, the approach that these guys take. Let's see if we can find it in. Maybe this is. Here we go. Okay, what they're looking at is different maturity levels. So you've got level 5 in these guys' books, called leadership, then it's going down in scale here now, managed, repeatable, initial, ad hoc, non-existent. So for each, they've got these maturity levels that they're trying to work out where you're at. And within, so then they look at a range of attributes and where the maturity exists within those attributes. So we've got adoption of ERM-based approach, ERM process management, risk appetite management, root cause discipline, uncovering risks, performance management, business resiliency and sustainability. Okay, so what they do is they look at each of these attributes and then decide where this organisation sits in terms of the maturity level for that attribute, and then I think comes up with an attribute for the whole, a level for the whole organisation. Now there's they've got a little software package that that you can pump information into. That's online, I think, and this is one that that produced. So there's a software vendor did this for the Logic Manager, and so you can. It's a very simplistic. It's not really the full sort of package. It's quite simplistic in terms of what the model is about, but we'll give you a quick overview as to where that sits. And if you want to, if you've reviewed your organisation and you want to jump onto to the RIMS website, I think it's look up RIMS, or Risk and Insurance Management Society. You'll soon find it. This is the output of their little process, and I just went through it. And I'm not sure how it relates directly to their model, but it just gives you a bit of a guide as to what the maturity is. Okay. So that's so adoption of ERM-based approach. So that's the first attribute here, and a discussion about it. ERM process management. They come up as level 4. Appetite management level 2. I just put in some junk information. Got something out. Root cause discipline level 2. Uncovering risks. Okay, so you get the picture, I'm sure, and you can take a look at that. Casualty Actuarial Society. This dates back to 2003. I talked a little bit about this before. So this is sort of an enterprise risk management model that organisations can put in. I think it does talk a little bit about maturity as well. So so that's something for you to take a look at. Yeah, there's some comments here. Standard & Poor's Enterprise Risk Management Ratings of Non-Financial Corporations. This is only just a quick sort of thing about recently asked questions, frequently asked questions. For organisations that they were preparing to do some to do the ratings of. So how does it fit in with the organisation and the like. Integrating enterprise risk management into corporate credit ratings. Now that was the drive. That's the driver behind doing all of this assessment work. So the idea is that once they benchmark the organisation, that may be used as supporting information for the credit rating of that organisation. So yeah, what it's all about, what's going on there. ERM process. What was this one? Oh yeah, that was the Inconsult risk management process. That's just a one-pager about the different aspects of a risk management process. Again, it's a simple start to what it's all about. Deloitte, ERM done right. KPMG have got some stuff on this. If you take some time and have a look at some of the other organisations, other consultancies, you'll find sort of some information on risk management maturity, and give you a bit of background as to what it's all about. Okay, I think that's probably.
Sorry.
Well, yeah.
For the first and the quantitative model, like exactly what kind of data you meant to capture in that model? I guess because I'm talking about between the two, when I see which one is one of them, but the first one I'm not clear about the quantitative model part. Like this information is mainly when I'm choosing the second option. Yeah. The very first option I chose.
Yep. Okay. All right. Now maybe it's a little bit confusing to talk about quantitative model. We're not talking like banking systems where we collect all this quantitative information in an organisation. What I'm looking for is something like what the ComCover processes that comes up with a number. 70% compliance. 70, you scored 70 out of 100 for this score. So there's a number associated with it. So it's not just a sort of a subjective sort of, oh, you've done well, good job, not bad. So we can use the results to benchmark against peer groups. Yeah? So we can say, oh look, you're in the top 10 percentile of organisations for enterprise risk management. So we've got some kind of quantification behind it. Now that quantification is going to be based on subjective information, generally, unless you can come up with any ideas, of how else you could measure risk management effectiveness. So that's So that's the challenge: how you turn that subjective assessment into something that's quantitative, that's something that's testable, and that we could sort of use. That's not easy.
Benchmark comes in, right? Benchmarking.
Right.
Take that information, that's what the benchmark comes in, right?
Right.
Accusing the difference.
Yeah. So you can say, all right, well, what's that important to answer this question? Well, let's think about that. Let me give you an example. That's quite something. I'll give you a tip. It's .cam. Okay. All right. Let's think. So, for example, say we were looking at one aspect of risk management. I don't know. I want to think back to that telecom example. So we're looking at say insurance. Say. Okay. So you've got question 1. And this is purely an example. Don't feel like you have to do this. All right. Question 1. How well does an organisation do whatever? Right. Question 2. Blah blah blah. Question 3, 4, 5. And there's a score. Now that score, we score them on the basis of maybe a score of 1 to 4 or 0 to 4. Okay, so they scored 1 for that question, they scored 3 for that, they scored 2 for that one, 0 for that one. And then we've got a weighting, say. Okay, so that weighting determines, well, how important is that question compared to another question? And we might score it out of 10. So that weighting's got a 9, that one's got a 5, that one's got a 4, that one's got an 8, 2. Multiply the two together, come up with 9, 3, 5, 15, 8, 0. Right? Add the total up. Right? And we can work out what the maximum potential score is, and we come up with some kind of number as a result of that. Yeah?
That makes sense. When you say formalizing black scores, I think, those kind of models.
What's that?
I would think like, VAR, risk.
Right, okay, all right, well, okay, no, fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, no, sorry for any confusion. No need to go down sort of that sort of route. We're just looking, how can we connect all this subjective assessment into some kind of benchmarking number? So then this comes out, I don't know what it is, but, so you've scored 65%, for insurance, and then we've got insurance, and then we've got something else, and we've got all your scores here, and then you come up with a total score of something else, sort of like 67% overall, based upon this is what you've scored in these other areas. So that, so that if we want to compare company A against company B, well, you scored 67, you scored something else, and they're comparable, even though there may be some slight differences between the types of products that the company makes. So we've got to think about, are there different risk profiles even between types of non-financial organisations. You know, is that an issue that we'll have to take into consideration? You know, so it's there's a fair bit of complexity, but how do we work through that and make it simple? Yeah.
When assigning the score, again, based on the judgment, the person who's doing the assigning the score. So again, we need to subjective, person to person. The person when you are assigning the scores to assigning the scores, assigning the scores to questions we ask, something like that. Yeah. Again, it could be subjective, depending on the knowledge of the person who's.
That's right. I mean, this is something to bring out in your paper.
So how we should be justifiable? Some will assign score 3, some will assign score 1. So how is it be justifiable again?
That's right. How would you manage that? I mean, there's several issues here. So, you know, firstly, who's asking what questions are you going to ask? So there's some variability. Is that the most appropriate question to ask? Is that the question to ask to get to where we want to get to? So secondly, the person's asking the question, right, or answering the question, are they the best person to answer the question? Thirdly, you know, there's a lot of sort of levels of variability or levels of interpretation before you get to a number at the end. I guess the challenge is to understand that. So it's a bit like we're producing a model here, but what are the limitations of our model? The limitations of our model are based around the way the questions are structured, the goal of the stakeholders, who's going to use this score, why the question structure to get to this house. So there's some sort of bigger picture issues to consider as you're structuring. So it's more the issues that I'm interested to get from you guys, rather than just the questions I'm going to ask. Let's take it to a, let's take it to a sort of a level where, okay, well, what's the context associated? What are the risks associated? You can do a sort of a risk assessment or a risk management process associated with developing this process. What are the limitations? What are the benefits of doing it? What are the limitations of the process? Any other thoughts? Okay. Well, I think this lecture sort of wraps up all of the enterprise risk management process stuff that we're with. In the coming weeks, we're going to start looking at some of the more, let's drill down a little bit into some of the risk silos a little bit. I think next week we've got psychology of risk. So that's behavioural and economics, which is an interesting one to play with. And we look at sustainability, insurance, strategic stuff. So thank you very much for your time. We'll see you next week. And, sorry about what I'll do is I'll post something on DSO, and then we can take it. Okay, that's fine. I mean, we'll see what we can do. You know, you tell me what you need. We'll try and provide that for you. I think one thing to keep in mind is, I didn't say it today and I should have said it, we're not interested in their risks. We're only interested in the framework.
But
Yeah.
it is to release that in approval from the management, the risk management company.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, okay. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, and you really need the correspondence because I used to work there and I kind of really do have in my contract.